The metal walls of the escape pod shook like a wild animal trying to break free. Katie Murphy held her 7-year-old brother Danny tight against her chest as the small ship fell toward the strange planet below. Red lights flashed everywhere and a loud alarm kept ringing in her ears. She could not stop the tears from falling down her face. Her parents were gone. The bad aliens had killed them and destroyed their big research ship called the Helena. Katie had watched through a small window as the enemy ships fired their weapons at her home. The automatic systems had pushed their escape pod away from the Helena just before it exploded into a million pieces of burning metal. Danny was crying too, but he did not understand what had happened. He kept asking where Mom and Dad were. Katie did not know what to tell him. She was only 15 years old, and now she had to take care of her little brother all by herself. The escape pod computers were speaking in a robot voice, but Katie could not understand most of the words. Something about landing and danger and emergency systems. The planet below them looked strange and beautiful. It had 2 suns in the sky that made everything look purple and gold. There were big forests and tall mountains and what looked like rivers running through green valleys. But Katie knew that just because a planet looked nice did not mean it was safe for humans to live on. The pod hit the ground so hard that Katie felt like her teeth would fall out. Metal bent and twisted around them. Glass broke and fell like rain. The pod rolled and bounced and finally stopped moving when it hit a group of big trees. Everything became very quiet except for the sound of Danny crying. Katie felt pain in her left arm, and when she looked down she could see that it was bent in a way that arms should not bend. Blood was coming from cuts on her face and hands. Danny had a big bump on his head and his eyes looked confused like he did not know where he was. The door of the pod would not open at first. Katie had to kick it many times before it finally broke away from the twisted metal. She helped Danny climb out of the broken ship, and they both stood in the strange purple forest looking around at their new world. The air smelled different here. It was thick and sweet like flowers, but also had a smell that Katie had never experienced before. The gravity felt heavier than Earth, which made walking harder. The trees were tall and had leaves that changed colors as the wind moved through them. Strange sounds came from deep in the forest. Some sounded like birds, but others were low and scary like big animals moving through the bushes. Katie found the emergency kit that was supposed to be in every escape pod. Inside were bandages and medicine and food that would last about 1 week. There was also a small tool for starting fires and a knife and some other things that might help them survive. But there was no communication device that worked and no way to call for help. She used the bandages to wrap Danny's head and tried to make a sling for her broken arm. The pain was very bad, but she had to be strong for her little brother. Danny kept asking questions about where they were and when they could go home. Katie told him they were on an adventure and that everything would be okay even though she was very scared. As the 2 suns began to set, the forest became darker and the strange sounds got louder. Katie used some of the broken metal from their pod to make a small shelter against a big tree. She gathered dry leaves and branches to make the ground softer for Danny to sleep on. When night came, the sounds in the forest became much worse. There were howls and roars and the sound of big things walking through the trees. Katie could see glowing eyes watching them from the darkness. She held the knife from the emergency kit and stayed awake all night to protect Danny. Danny had bad dreams and woke up many times asking for their parents. Each time Katie had to tell him again that Mom and Dad were not coming back. She tried to explain that the bad aliens had hurt them, but Danny was too young to really understand. He just knew that he was scared and wanted to go home. The first night seemed to last forever. Katie listened to every sound and watched every shadow. She was sure that something big and hungry would come out of the forest and try to eat them. But when the 2 suns came up again, they were both still alive and nothing had attacked them. Katie knew they could not stay by the broken escape pod forever. The emergency food would not last long, and they needed to find water and a better place to live. She also needed to take care of Danny's head injury, which seemed to be getting worse. He was having trouble remembering things, and sometimes he would just stare at nothing. For long periods of time, she packed everything useful from the emergency kit into a bag made from cloth she tore from the pod seats. Then she helped Danny walk away from their crashed ship into the strange purple forest. Katie did not know where they were going or how they would survive, but she knew they had to try. The planet was beautiful but dangerous. Every step they took brought new sights and sounds and smells. Some of the plants had flowers that glowed with soft light. Others had thorns that looked sharp enough to cut through metal. Katie tried to remember everything her scientist parents had taught. her about staying safe on alien worlds. They walked slowly because Danny got tired easily and Katie's broken arm made it hard to carry their supplies. Every few hours they would rest and Katie would give Danny small amounts of food and water from their limited supply. She tried to stay positive and tell him stories about the adventure they were having, but inside she was more scared than she had ever been in her life. As they walked deeper into the forest, Katie began to understand that they were completely alone on this strange world. There was no one coming to save them and no easy way to get home. If they were going to survive, she would have to learn how to take care of them both. At 15 years old, Katie Murphy had become the only thing standing between her little brother and death on an alien planet. 3 months had passed since Katie and Danny crashed on the alien planet. Katie looked older now. Her face was thin from not having enough food, and her hands were rough from all the hard work she had to do every day. But she was still alive, and so was Danny, and that was what mattered most. Katie had learned many things about staying alive in the purple forest. She knew which plants were safe to eat and which ones would make them sick. She had found this out by testing tiny pieces of different plants on her skin first and then on her tongue. If nothing bad happened, she would eat a very small amount and wait to see if her stomach hurt. It was dangerous, but she had no choice. The shelter she built was much better than the first one by their crashed ship. Katie used fallen branches and strange vine-like plants to make walls and a roof that kept them dry when the purple rain fell. She learned to weave the alien plants together to make the walls stronger. Inside the shelter, she made beds from soft leaves and kept their few supplies organized and safe. Finding water had been the hardest part at first. Katie followed the sounds of running water until she found a small stream that flowed down from the mountains. The water looked clean and tasted good, but she boiled it anyway, using a metal container she had taken from their escape pod. She remembered her parents telling her that alien water might have things in it that could make humans very sick. Danny was getting better, but he still had problems from hitting his head in the crash. Sometimes he would forget things that had just happened. Other times he would stare at nothing and not answer when Katie talked to him. His headaches were very bad, and there was nothing Katie could do to help except give him water and let him rest. The animals on this planet were unlike anything Katie had ever seen. There were big creatures that looked like a mix between a deer and a horse, but with 6 legs instead of 4. They ate the purple leaves from the trees and did not seem afraid of Katie and Danny. There were also small furry animals that reminded Katie of squirrels, but these ones had long tails that glowed in the dark. Katie learned to hunt the smaller animals using traps she made from sticks and vines. The meat tasted strange, but it gave them protein that the plants could not provide. She also found bird-like creatures that laid eggs in nests high in the trees. Getting the eggs was dangerous because Katie had to climb very tall trees with her arm that was still not completely healed. The most interesting animals were the ones that seemed almost smart, like dolphins or monkeys on Earth. They had blue fur and big eyes, and they would watch Katie and Danny from the trees. Sometimes they would copy the sounds that Katie made. She started to think they might be trying to communicate, but she did not know how to talk to them. As the seasons changed on the alien planet, Katie noticed that some of the plants grew different things at different times. She learned to collect and store food when there was plenty, so they would have enough during the times when food was harder to find. She dried meat and fruits and kept them in containers made from hard plant shells. Katie also discovered that some of the plants could be used as medicine. When she got a bad cut on her leg and it became infected, one of the glowing flowers seemed to help heal it faster. She was careful to test everything first, but she found plants that helped with headaches and stomach problems and wounds that would not heal. Danny was changing too. Even though his head injury made some things harder for him, he seemed to understand the alien forest in ways that Katie did not. He could tell when it was going to rain before Katie saw any clouds. He knew when dangerous animals were nearby, even when Katie could not hear or see anything. Sometimes he would point to a part of the forest and say they should not go that way, and later Katie would find signs that something big and scary lived there. The hardest time came when the weather got cold. Katie had not expected winter to come so quickly. The 2 suns seemed farther away, and the purple rain turned into something like snow, but it was blue and felt different than snow on Earth. The temperature dropped so fast that Katie barely had time to prepare. She spent days gathering wood and making their shelter warmer. She used animal furs from her hunting to make blankets and warm clothes for Danny and herself. Finding food became much harder because many of the plants stopped growing, and the animals went away to warmer places. Danny got sick during the coldest part of winter. His fever was so high that Katie was afraid he might die. She tried everything she knew, but nothing seemed to help. She gave him water and kept him warm and used the medicine plants she had found, but the fever would not break. Danny would sleep for many hours, and when he woke up, he did not know where he was. Katie was more scared during those days than she had been since they first crashed. She had learned how to find food and make shelter and protect them from dangerous animals. But she did not know how to save Danny from the sickness that was burning him up from inside. That was when she saw the smoke rising from the mountains far to the north. At first she thought it might be another crash or maybe a natural fire. But the smoke came up straight and steady like it was from a fireplace or a cooking fire. That meant someone was there. Someone who might be able to help Danny. Katie made the hardest decision of her life. She packed their few supplies and picked up Danny, who was too weak to walk. He was bigger now than when they first crashed, but Katie had gotten stronger too from all the hard work of surviving. She started walking toward the mountains carrying her sick brother, and hoping that whoever was making that smoke would help them instead of hurt them. The journey took 2 days, and Katie had to rest many times. Danny got heavier with each step, and her back and arms hurt terribly, but she could not stop because she could feel that Danny was getting sicker. If she did not find help soon, she was going to lose the only family she had left in the universe. Katie Murphy had kept herself and her brother alive for 3 months on an alien planet. She had learned to hunt and build and heal and protect, but now she needed something more than survival skills. She needed hope. The cabin was bigger than Katie had expected. It was built into the side of a cliff like it was part of the mountain itself. The walls were made of thick logs, and the roof had strange panels that caught the light from the 2 suns. Katie could see wires and equipment that looked like human technology, but also things she did not recognize. Danny was burning with fever in her arms and getting heavier with each step. Katie had carried him up the mountain path for 2 days, and she was so tired she could barely stand. Her legs shook and her broken arm ached terribly. But the smoke was coming from this cabin, which meant someone was inside who might help them. Katie walked up to the heavy wooden door and used her fist to bang on it as hard as she could. Her voice was rough from thirst and fear when she called out for help. She told whoever was inside that her brother was very sick and they needed medicine. She banged on the door again and again until her hands hurt. The door opened slowly, and Katie found herself looking up at the biggest man she had ever seen. He was tall and wide with muscles that showed he did hard work every day. His hair and beard were gray and his face was covered with old scars. But it was his eyes that made Katie step back. They were blue and cold and looked at her like she was something dangerous. The man stared at Katie and Danny for a long time without saying anything. Katie could see him looking at their torn clothes and thin faces, and the way Danny hung limply in her arms. She thought he was going to close the door and leave them outside to die. But then Danny made a small sick sound and the man's face changed. He opened the door wider and told Katie to come inside quickly. His voice was deep and rough, like he had not talked to another person in a very long time. Katie stumbled into the cabin carrying Danny and was amazed by what she saw. The inside of the cabin was warm and clean, and full of things that Katie had not seen since before the crash. There were electric lights and a kitchen with running water and shelves full of food and supplies. In one corner was a bed with real sheets and blankets. In another corner was a workshop with tools and machines and parts that looked like they came from spaceships. The big man pointed to the bed, and Katie carefully laid Danny down on the soft mattress. Danny's skin was hot and dry, and his breathing was fast and shallow. The man looked at Danny closely and felt his forehead with the back of his hand. Then he went to a metal box on the wall and took out bottles of medicine and other medical supplies. Katie watched as the man gave Danny medicine through a small needle in his arm. He also gave him other medicine to drink and put cold cloths on his head to bring down the fever. The man worked quietly and efficiently like he had done this many times before. Katie realized he must have medical training from somewhere. After taking care of Danny, the man finally looked at Katie. He saw her broken arm and the cuts and bruises all over her body. Without asking permission, he began to examine her arm and clean her wounds. Katie was too tired and too grateful to resist. She had been taking care of everyone else for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone take care of her. The man told Katie his name was Marcus Cole. He had been living alone on this planet for 8 years after his military ship crashed in the mountains. He was a soldier and an engineer, and he had built this cabin to survive while he waited for rescue that never came. After a few years, he decided he liked being alone and did not want to be found. Katie told Marcus her story about the attack on their research ship and how she had kept Danny alive in the forest for 3 months. Marcus listened without interrupting, but she could see surprise in his cold blue eyes. He seemed amazed that a 15-year-old girl had survived so long on her own while taking care of a sick child. Marcus had questions about the attack on Katie's ship. He wanted to know what the enemy ships looked like and what weapons they used. When Katie described the alien raiders, Marcus's face became very serious. He said these were the same aliens who had attacked his military ship years ago. They were called Zephyrians, and they were very dangerous. Danny slept for almost a full day after Marcus gave him the medicine. Katie stayed by his bed the whole time, watching him breathe and waiting for his fever to break. Marcus brought her hot food and clean water and told her she needed to rest too. But Katie was afraid to sleep because she had been the only one protecting Danny for so long. Marcus showed Katie around his cabin and explained how everything worked. He had solar panels on the roof that made electricity from the light of the 2 suns. He had machines that cleaned and recycled water from a spring deep in the mountain. He grew food in a small garden and had enough supplies stored to last for years. The most impressive thing was Marcus's workshop. He had built tools and weapons and communication equipment from parts he had salvaged from his crashed ship. Katie saw rifles and ammunition and devices she did not recognize. Marcus explained that he had spent years preparing for the day when the Zephyrians might come back to this planet. Katie felt safe for the first time since the crash. The cabin was warm and secure, and Marcus clearly knew how to protect them from danger. But she also felt guilty for bringing trouble to his peaceful life. She offered to leave as soon as Danny was better, but Marcus told her that would be foolish. Winter was coming and they would not survive alone in the mountains. When Danny finally woke up, his fever was gone and his eyes were clear. He was weak, but he recognized Katie and asked for water and food. Marcus brought him soup and bread and watched carefully to make sure he could keep the food down. Danny looked at Marcus with curiosity but no fear. Children seemed to trust the big mountain man easier than adults would. Over the next few days, Danny got stronger and began to explore the cabin. He was fascinated by all of Marcus's equipment and tools. Marcus seemed uncomfortable with having children in his space, but he answered Danny's questions patiently. Katie could tell that Marcus was not used to being around people, but he was trying to be kind. Katie helped Marcus with daily tasks around the cabin. She cooked meals and cleaned and organized supplies. She also helped him in the workshop because her parents had taught her about electronics and engineering. Marcus was impressed by how quickly she learned to use his tools and fix broken equipment. Marcus began to teach Katie and Danny important survival skills they would need on this dangerous planet. He showed them how to use weapons and how to recognize signs of approaching storms. He taught them about the local wildlife and which creatures were dangerous and which were harmless. Katie realized that Marcus was planning for them to stay permanently. He was not just helping them recover from their journey. He was preparing them to become part of his isolated life in the mountains. Katie was not sure how she felt about this, but she knew they had nowhere else to go. The mountain man had saved their lives, but Katie wondered what he expected in return. Marcus Cole told his story slowly over many evenings by the fire. He had been a military engineer working on secret projects for the human government. His ship was carrying important information about alien technology when the Zephyrians attacked it 8 years ago. Most of his crew died in the battle, but Marcus escaped in a damaged shuttle that crashed in these mountains. At first, Marcus had tried to repair his communication equipment to call for rescue. But the more he worked on the alien planet, the more he liked the quiet life away from war and politics. He had seen too many friends die in battles against the Zephyrians. Living alone in the mountains felt peaceful compared to the violence he had left behind. Marcus showed Katie and Danny the remains of his crashed shuttle, which was hidden in a cave near the cabin. Most of it was too damaged to repair, but he had used many parts to build the equipment in his workshop. The solar panels and water recycling systems had come from the shuttle, along with his weapons and medical supplies. Katie proved that she was more than just a survivor. She helped Marcus improve many of his systems using knowledge she had learned from her scientist parents. Together they built better antenna arrays and upgraded the cabin's power systems. Marcus was impressed by how quickly Katie learned to use advanced tools and solve engineering problems. Danny was recovering well from his head injury, but something strange was happening to him. He seemed to know things that he should not know. He could tell when storms were coming hours before Marcus's weather instrument showed any changes. He knew when dangerous animals were nearby even when they were too far away to see or hear. Marcus noticed Danny's unusual abilities, but he did not say anything at first. He had seen stranger things during his military service, and he knew that alien planets sometimes affected humans in unexpected ways. As long as Danny was not in danger, Marcus decided to wait and see what would develop. Katie was grateful for Marcus's help, but she also felt like she needed to prove that she and Danny were not just burdens. She worked harder than necessary on every task and pushed herself to learn new skills even when she was tired. Marcus could see that the girl was trying too hard, but he understood why she felt the need to be useful. The relationship between the three of them grew stronger as winter approached. Marcus taught Katie how to shoot his rifles and how to maintain the weapons properly. He showed her how to set traps for dangerous animals and how to read tracks in the soil. Katie learned quickly, and Marcus began to trust her with important responsibilities. Danny spent hours in Marcus's workshop, learning how different machines worked. Even though he was only 7 years old, he seemed to understand complex mechanical systems better than most adults. Marcus found himself explaining advanced concepts to the boy and being surprised by how well Danny grasped them. The first test of their partnership came when a pack of predators surrounded the cabin one night. These animals were bigger than wolves and had razor-sharp claws and glowing red eyes. They had been drawn to the cabin by the smell of food and the warmth of their electric lights. Marcus and Katie worked together to defend their home. Marcus fired his rifle from the main window while Katie used a smaller weapon to cover the back of the cabin. Danny stayed low and helped by passing ammunition and watching for enemies trying to climb onto the roof. The battle lasted most of the night, but they killed or drove away all of the attackers. After the fight, Marcus looked at Katie with new respect. She had not panicked or made mistakes under pressure. She had followed his instructions perfectly and kept her sector secure while he dealt with the main threat. Marcus realized that Katie was becoming a real partner in their survival rather than just someone he was protecting. Katie felt proud that she had proven herself in combat, but she also felt sad that violence was becoming normal in their lives. She remembered when her biggest worry was homework and tests at school. Now she was learning to kill dangerous animals and prepare for attacks by alien raiders. The girl she used to be seemed like someone from a different lifetime. Marcus began to share more of his knowledge with Katie and Danny. He taught them about tactics and strategy and how to think like soldiers when facing dangerous situations. He showed them maps of the surrounding area and explained the best routes for escape if they were ever forced to leave the cabin. The winter months passed peacefully after the predator attack. Marcus had stockpiled enough food and fuel to keep them comfortable even during the worst storms. Katie learned to cook meals from the preserved foods and local ingredients. Danny helped maintain the equipment and became very good at repairing small mechanical problems. Marcus found that having Katie and Danny in his life made the isolation less difficult. He had not realized how lonely he had become during his years alone on the mountain. Teaching the children and working with Katie on engineering projects gave him a sense of purpose he had not felt since his military days. Katie began to think of the cabin as home rather than just a temporary refuge. She and Danny had their own spaces and routines now. They contributed to the work that kept them all alive and safe. Marcus treated them as equals rather than children who needed constant protection, but Katie still worried about the future. They had no contact with other humans and no way to leave the planet if they wanted to. Danny was growing up in isolation without other children to play with or teachers to guide his education. Katie wondered if she was giving him the childhood he deserved, or if she was trapping him in a life he had not chosen. Marcus seemed to sense Katie's concerns about their situation. He told her that rescue was still possible if they could repair the communication systems in his crashed shuttle. The project would take months of work and might not succeed, but it would give them a chance to contact human space if they wanted to. Katie was not sure if she wanted to be rescued anymore. The cabin felt safe and comfortable, and Marcus had become like family to them. But she knew that Danny should have choices about his future, and she could not make those decisions for him without giving him options. The three of them began working together on the communication project. Marcus provided the technical knowledge while Katie contributed her understanding of electronics, and Danny helped with the detailed assembly work. It was slow progress, but they had plenty of time and no other urgent projects. As spring returned to the alien planet, Katie realized how much they had all changed during the winter months. Marcus smiled more often and seemed less haunted by his military past. Danny was stronger and more confident, and his special abilities were becoming more pronounced. Katie herself felt older and wiser and more capable than the frightened girl who had knocked on Marcus's door months ago. The mountain man had not just saved their lives. He had helped them become stronger and more complete as human beings. Katie hoped that she and Danny had given him something valuable in return. The cave system behind Marcus's cabin was much larger than Katie had first realized. While searching for materials to repair their communication equipment, she and Marcus discovered passages that went deep into the mountain. Some of these tunnels were natural, but others showed signs of being carved by intelligent beings using advanced tools. Marcus brought electric lights and weapons as they explored the deeper caves. The walls were covered with symbols and patterns that looked similar to writing, but in no language that either Marcus or Katie recognized. The passages were perfectly straight and the surfaces were smooth, like they had been cut by some kind of energy beam, rather than physical tools. After walking for almost an hour through the tunnels, they found a huge underground chamber filled with machinery that was clearly not made by humans. The equipment was massive and complex, with curved surfaces that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Everything was covered with a thin layer of dust, but the machines looked like they could still work if someone knew how to activate them. Katie recognized some of the symbols from her parents, research notes about ancient alien civilizations. Her parents had studied ruins on other planets that had been left behind by a race that disappeared thousands of years ago. These people had been miners who traveled from planet to planet, looking for rare materials and elements. Marcus had seen similar technology during his military service, but he had never been allowed to study it closely. The human government kept all information about alien artifacts classified at the highest levels. Only a few scientists and engineers were permitted to work on projects involving alien technology, and Marcus had not been one of them. The most interesting discovery was a partially damaged communication array that was built into one wall of the chamber. Katie could see that it was far more advanced than anything humans had ever built. The alien equipment could probably send messages across the galaxy instantly instead of taking years like human communication systems. Marcus and Katie spent days studying the alien machines and trying to understand how they worked. Katie used her knowledge of electronics and physics, while Marcus applied his engineering experience. Slowly, they began to figure out which parts controlled power and which ones handled communication functions. Danny seemed to understand the alien technology better than either of the adults. When Katie and Marcus were puzzled by a control system, Danny would point to the correct panel or suggest which symbols to press. He could not explain how he knew these things, but his suggestions usually worked perfectly. The breakthrough came when they accidentally activated a power cell that had been dormant for thousands of years. Energy flowed through the ancient machines and lights began to flash in patterns across the control surfaces. Katie and Marcus worked quickly to understand the startup sequence before the power ran out again. With Danny's help, they managed to bring the communication array partially online. The system was damaged and many functions did not work, but they could see that it was trying to connect to other similar arrays across the galaxy. Marcus realized that repairing this equipment would give them communication capabilities far beyond anything he had hoped for. But as they worked to restore more functions to the alien array, something went wrong. Katie accidentally activated a beacon system that sent a powerful signal into space. The transmission only lasted for a few seconds before the damaged equipment shut down again, but the signal had already been sent. Marcus was very worried about the accidental transmission. He explained that beacon signals were used by ships to locate planets and installations. If the wrong people detected their signal, they might come to investigate. The Zephyrians were known to be very interested in ancient alien technology and would certainly want to claim this site for themselves. Katie felt terrible about making such a dangerous mistake, but Marcus told her that it could not be undone. They had to prepare for the possibility that their signal had been detected by hostile forces. On the positive side, the beacon might also have been received by human ships who could come to rescue them. Over the following days, they worked to repair more of the alien communication system, while also preparing the cabin's defenses for possible attack. Marcus moved weapons and ammunition to strategic positions around the mountain approaches. He also began working on escape plans in case they were forced to abandon the cabin. Danny's abilities were becoming stronger and more obvious. He could sense when the alien machines were about to malfunction and could predict which repairs would be successful. He also seemed to know when dangerous weather was approaching or when wildlife was moving through the area around their mountain. Katie was amazed by her brother's development, but she was also worried about what it meant for his future. Danny was becoming something more than a normal human child. She did not know if his changes were permanent or if they would continue to progress as he got older. Marcus had theories about Danny's abilities, but he kept them to himself. During his military service, he had heard rumors about humans who were affected by prolonged exposure to alien technology. Some people seemed to develop enhanced senses and intuitive understanding of alien systems. The military had tried to study these individuals, but the research was highly classified. The alien ruins contained other mysteries besides the communication equipment. Katie found rooms full of mining tools and processing machinery that could extract valuable materials from rock and ore. There were also storage areas that still contained samples of rare elements and crystals that might be worth tremendous amounts of money. Marcus began to think that their accidental beacon signal might not be entirely bad. If human forces came to investigate, they would find a treasure trove of alien technology and resources. Katie and Danny would be heroes for discovering such an important site, and they would certainly be rewarded rather than punished. But Marcus also knew that the military would want to study Danny's unusual abilities. They would be very interested in how a human child had developed such strong connections to alien technology. Katie might lose her brother to government scientists who would want to run tests and experiments on him as they continued to repair and study the alien equipment Marcus taught Katie and Danny more advanced combat skills. He showed them how to use explosives and how to set up ambush positions in the mountain terrain. He wanted them to be prepared for any situation that might develop. Katie practiced with weapons until she could hit targets accurately at long range. She learned to move quietly through the forest and how to track enemies by their footprints and other signs. Marcus was turning her into a skilled soldier, even though she was still just 16 years old. The days passed with a mixture of scientific discovery and military preparation. They made progress in understanding the alien technology, but they also knew that danger was approaching. The beacon signal had been sent and someone had probably received it. Now they could only wait to see who would arrive first and whether they would come as friends or enemies. Marcus, Katie, and Danny had found something that would change human understanding of the galaxy forever. But they might not live long enough to share their discovery with the rest of humanity. The first sign of trouble came from Danny. 3 days after they had sent the accidental beacon signal, he woke up from sleep looking frightened and confused. He told Katie that something bad was coming from the sky, but he could not explain what he meant. Marcus had learned to trust Danny's unusual feelings, so he immediately began preparing for visitors. Marcus climbed to the highest point, near the cabin, with his military binoculars and scanned the sky for any signs of approaching ships. At first he saw nothing unusual, but by afternoon he spotted tiny flashes of light that looked like spacecraft entering the planet's atmosphere. The ships were still very far away, but they were definitely heading toward this part of the planet. Katie helped Marcus move their most important supplies into hidden storage areas in the cave system. They packed food and ammunition and medical supplies in places where enemies would not easily find them. They also hid backup weapons and communication equipment in case they were forced to abandon the main cabin. Marcus's military training told him that multiple ships meant either a large rescue operation or a major attack force. Since they had only sent one short beacon signal, it seemed unlikely that human forces would respond with a large fleet. This meant the approaching ships were probably Zephyrian raiders who had detected their transmission. The ships stayed far away for the first day, as if they were scanning the planet from orbit. Marcus explained that modern military vessels could detect life signs and energy sources from space using very sensitive instruments. The aliens would be mapping the planet's surface and looking for the exact location of their beacon signal. Danny became more agitated as the ships got closer to their location. He kept saying that the bad people were looking for them and that they needed to hide deeper in the mountain. Katie tried to comfort her brother, but she could see that his special abilities were causing him real distress as he sensed the approaching danger. On the second day, Marcus detected smaller craft, separating from the main ships and beginning systematic search patterns across the mountain region. These were probably scout ships or fighters that could land and deploy ground forces. Marcus knew that it was only a matter of time before the search teams found their mountain and the hidden cabin. Marcus made the difficult decision to activate the defensive systems he had been building for 8 years. He armed explosive traps along the main approaches to the cabin and activated motion sensors that would warn them if anyone tried to climb the mountain paths. He also charged the power cells for his energy weapons and prepared ammunition for conventional firearms. Katie was amazed by how much military equipment Marcus had hidden around the cabin. There were weapon caches and observation posts and communication relays that she had never noticed before. Marcus had spent years turning their mountain into a fortress that could resist a significant attack. The third day brought the first actual sighting of enemy forces. Marcus spotted Zephyrian scout ships flying low through the valleys and canyons, searching for heat signatures and energy readings. The aliens were being very thorough and systematic in their search. They would find the cabin eventually, no matter how well it was hidden. Marcus gathered Katie and Danny around his tactical planning table, which showed detailed maps of the mountain terrain. He explained that they had perhaps 12 hours before the enemy found them. They could try to escape deeper into the cave system, or they could stay and fight from prepared defensive positions. Katie surprised Marcus by choosing to stay and fight rather than run away. She said that the cabin was their home now, and they should not give it up without a battle. She also pointed out that the cave system might be a trap if the aliens found the entrances and blocked them inside. Danny agreed with his sister and said he was not afraid of the bad people. Marcus felt proud of Katie's courage, but he was also worried about putting the children in danger. He had been a soldier for many years, but Katie and Danny were civilians who should not have to fight in a war. However, he also knew that running away might not save them, and at least the cabin gave them good defensive advantages. The final preparations took most of the day. Marcus positioned weapons at key firing points and made sure Katie and Danny knew how to use the communication systems to call for help if something happened to him. He also showed them the escape routes he had planned and where to find emergency supplies if they were forced to abandon the mountain. Katie spent hours checking and cleaning weapons until she could field strip and reassemble them with her eyes closed. Marcus had taught her to shoot accurately at long range, and now she would have to use those skills against living enemies instead of paper targets. The thought scared her, but she tried not to show her fear. Danny helped by monitoring the alien communication frequencies with equipment they had salvaged from the ancient ruins. His unusual abilities let him understand some of the Zephyrian radio transmissions, even though the language was completely foreign to Katie and Marcus. Danny reported that the aliens were getting frustrated with their search and were planning to expand their operations. As night fell, Marcus detected the first enemy ground, teams beginning to climb toward their mountain. The aliens were moving slowly and carefully as if they expected to find resistance. They were probably experienced soldiers who knew how to assault fortified positions. Marcus activated his perimeter alarms and motion detectors. Red lights began flashing on his control panel as the sensors picked up multiple contacts approaching from different directions. The aliens had surrounded the mountain and were closing in from all sides simultaneously. There would be no escape routes left open. Katie took her position at a firing point that overlooked the main approach to the cabin. She could see nothing in the darkness, but her rifle scope had night vision capabilities that would let her spot enemies even in complete blackness. Her hands were steady and her breathing was controlled just like Marcus had taught her. Danny stayed in the cabin's command center monitoring communications and sensor readings. He would coordinate their defense and warn Marcus and Katie about enemy movements they might not be able to see. Even though he was only 8 years old now, he understood tactics and strategy better than many adult soldiers. The waiting was the hardest part. Katie could hear her own heartbeat and feel sweat on her palms despite the cool mountain air. She knew that very soon she would have to shoot at living beings who were trying to kill her family. The girl who had once worried about school tests was about to fight for her life against alien warriors. Marcus's voice came through their communication system, calm and steady. He reminded Katie and Danny of their planned defensive tactics and told them he was proud of how brave they were being. He said that no matter what happened in the coming battle, they had already proven they were true survivors. The attack would begin soon, and their peaceful life in the mountain cabin would be over forever. The first shots came just before dawn when the alien ground forces tried to rush the cabin under cover of darkness. Marcus had expected this tactic and was ready for them. His motion sensors detected the approaching enemies and triggered explosive charges that lit up the mountainside with brilliant flashes of fire and destruction. Katie saw her first Zephyrian warrior through her rifle scope as it scrambled for cover behind a boulder. The alien was taller than a human with gray skin and 4 arms that ended in clawed hands. It carried advanced energy weapons that fired beams of superheated plasma instead of bullets. Katie took careful aim and squeezed the trigger just like Marcus had taught her. The alien fell and did not get up again. Katie felt sick to her stomach, but she forced herself to keep shooting as more enemies appeared in her scope. She had practiced for hundreds of hours on targets, but killing real living beings was completely different. Each shot meant ending someone's life, and Katie tried not to think about whether the aliens had families waiting for them. Marcus was firing from multiple positions, using weapons he had pre-positioned around the cabin's perimeter. His military training showed in the way he conserved ammunition and picked his targets carefully. Every shot he fired hit an enemy, and the aliens quickly learned to respect the deadly accurate fire coming from the human positions. Danny coordinated their defense from inside the cabin using the communication, equipment, and sensor displays. He could track enemy movements that Marcus and Katie could not see, and warned them when aliens were trying to flank their positions. His unusual abilities let him predict where the next attack would come from before the aliens themselves had decided. The battle continued through the morning as wave after wave of Zephyrian soldiers tried to break through their defenses. The aliens had superior numbers and more advanced weapons, but they could not dislodge the humans from their well-prepared mountain fortress. Marcus had chosen his defensive positions perfectly and knew exactly how to use the terrain to his advantage. Katie ran out of ammunition for her first rifle and had to switch to one of Marcus's backup weapons. Her hands were shaking now from adrenaline and exhaustion, but her shooting was still accurate. She had learned to control her fear and focus only on protecting her family and their home. The frightened girl who had knocked on Marcus's door was now a deadly accurate sniper. By afternoon, the aliens changed their tactics and began using heavier weapons to try to destroy the cabin itself. Energy blasts that could melt through solid rock began hitting the log walls, and Marcus realized they could not hold their position much longer. He activated emergency protocols and began preparing to fall back into the cave system. The retreat to the caves was the most dangerous part of the entire battle. Marcus and Katie had to cover each other as they moved from position to position, while Danny gathered essential supplies from inside the cabin. The aliens were pressing their attack hard now, and energy beams were flying in every direction. Marcus was hit in the shoulder by a plasma blast as they reached the cave entrance. The wound was serious and bleeding heavily, but he insisted on staying in the fight rather than letting Katie and Danny face the aliens alone. He used medical supplies from their emergency kit to stop the bleeding and kept firing his weapon with his good arm. The cave system gave them new defensive advantages, but also created new problems. The aliens could not use their heaviest weapons without risking cave-ins that would trap everyone underground, but the confined spaces also meant that close combat was more likely, and the aliens had physical advantages in hand-to-hand fighting. Katie found herself fighting enemies at ranges of only a few meters. In the narrow tunnels, she used a shotgun loaded with special ammunition that Marcus had prepared for exactly this situation. The weapon was devastatingly effective in the confined spaces, but Katie had to be very careful not to hit Danny or Marcus in the confusion. Danny's abilities were strongest in the ancient alien chambers deep in the cave system. He could activate defensive systems that the previous inhabitants had built thousands of years ago. Energy barriers appeared across tunnel entrances, and automated weapons began firing at the invading aliens. Even Danny did not understand how he was controlling the alien technology. The second day of battle was fought entirely underground as the aliens tried to clear the humans out of their cave fortress. Marcus was getting weaker from blood loss and exhaustion, but he refused to stop fighting. Katie had taken over most of the tactical decisions and was proving to be as good a combat leader as Marcus himself. The turning point came when Danny activated a communication system in the deepest part of the alien ruins. The powerful transmitter sent out a distress signal that could be heard across the entire star system. Danny somehow knew the correct frequency to reach human ships and the right codes to authenticate their emergency message. Katie was reloading her weapon when she heard the sound of human voices on their communication equipment. A rescue fleet led by Captain Beth Rogers had detected their distress signal and was approaching the planet at maximum speed. The human ships would arrive within hours, but Katie was not sure they could hold out that long. Marcus made the decision to launch a counterattack against the aliens, rather than continuing to defend passively. He reasoned that aggressive action might buy them the time they needed for rescue to arrive. Katie thought the plan was too dangerous, but she trusted Marcus's military judgment more than her own fears. The counterattack caught the aliens by surprise because they had not expected the humans to leave their defensive positions. Marcus and Katie moved through the cave system using passages the aliens had not discovered and struck at their rear guard. The sudden appearance of human fighters behind their lines caused confusion and panic among the Zephyrian forces. Katie fought with desperate courage during the counterattack because she knew this was their last chance to survive. She had become an experienced soldier over the past 3 days, but she was still just 16 years old, and her strength was nearly exhausted. Only her determination to protect Danny and Marcus kept her moving forward. The first human dropships arrived just as Marcus collapsed from his wounds, and Katie was down to her last few rounds of ammunition. Marine assault teams landed on the mountain and immediately engaged the alien forces with overwhelming firepower. The sound of human weapons and the sight of human uniforms was the most beautiful thing Katie had ever experienced. Captain Rogers herself led the final assault that drove the remaining aliens away from the mountain and secured the area around the cabin. Katie stumbled out of the caves carrying Danny and supporting the wounded Marcus. She was covered in dirt and blood and looked like she had been fighting for weeks instead of days. The rescue captain looked at Katie with amazement and respect as she realized that this teenage girl had held off an entire alien assault force for 3 days. Katie Murphy had not just survived the attack but had actively defeated professional soldiers who had superior weapons and training. She had become a warrior worthy of respect from any military officer. The mountain that had been their peaceful home was now a battlefield covered with the wreckage of alien equipment and scarred by energy weapons. But Katie and her family had won their fight and proved that humans could stand against any enemy when they were defending the people they loved. Captain Beth Rogers stood in the ruins of Marcus's cabin, looking at the aftermath of the 3-day battle with amazement. The evidence showed that 3 humans had held off more than 50 Zephyrian warriors using nothing but superior tactics and determination. She had seen veteran military units perform less effectively against similar odds. Katie sat beside Marcus as the medical team worked to treat his wounds and stabilize his condition. The doctors said he would recover fully but needed weeks of rest and proper medical care. Katie had saved his life by stopping the bleeding and keeping him conscious during the final hours of the battle. Danny was being examined by specialists who were trying to understand his unusual abilities. The boy could operate alien technology that human scientists had been studying for decades without success. He seemed to have an intuitive connection to the ancient machines that went far beyond normal human capabilities. Captain Rogers offered to evacuate all 3 survivors immediately and take them back to human space where they would receive proper medical care and debriefing. Marcus was too weak to argue, but he insisted that Katie and Danny should be free to make their own choices about their future. Katie surprised everyone by asking if they could stay on the planet instead of leaving. She explained that the mountain had become their home and they had discovered things that were too important to abandon. The alien ruins contained technology that could change human understanding of the galaxy, and she wanted to continue studying them. The captain was reluctant to leave civilians on such a dangerous planet, but she understood Katie's arguments. The discovery of functional alien communication equipment and advanced mining technology was potentially worth more than entire human colonies. Someone would need to stay and continue the research work that Katie and Marcus had begun. Danny supported his sister's decision to remain on the planet. He felt more comfortable here than he ever had in human space, and his abilities seemed to be growing stronger each day. The alien technology responded to him in ways that no human scientist could replicate, and he wanted to learn more about his connection to the ancient machines. Marcus was proud of Katie's choice, but also worried about the responsibility she was accepting. At 16 years old, she was volunteering to become humanity's expert on alien technology and the leader of a new research colony. It was a huge burden for someone so young, but Marcus knew that Katie was stronger than most adults. Captain Rogers agreed to establish a permanent research station on the planet with Katie as the senior xenobiologist and Marcus as head of security. A team of scientists and military personnel would be sent from human space to support their work. Danny would receive special education tailored to his unique abilities and connection to alien systems. The news of their discovery and successful defense spread quickly through human space. Katie Murphy became famous as the teenage girl who had survived alone on an alien planet and then fought off a major enemy attack. Military academies studied the battle as an example of how superior tactics could overcome numerical disadvantages. Marcus received commendations for his role in protecting the children and defending the alien ruins. His years of preparation and military expertise had made the difference between victory and defeat, but he was most proud of how Katie had grown from a frightened refugee into a competent leader and warrior. The new research colony grew quickly as scientists and support staff arrived from human space. Katie found herself managing teams of adults who looked to her for guidance about the alien technology and the planet's unique ecosystem. Her knowledge gained from months of survival made her invaluable to the colonization effort. Danny became the key to unlocking many of the alien systems that had remained dormant for thousands of years. With his help, the research teams activated, manufacturing equipment that could produce materials stronger than anything humans had ever developed. They also restored communication arrays that could send messages instantly across the galaxy. Katie continued her education through electronic courses transmitted from human universities, but her real learning came from hands-on work with alien technology. She developed theories about how the ancient civilization had built their mining operations and why they had eventually abandoned this planet. The most important discovery came when Danny activated a central computer system in the deepest part of the ruins. The alien database contained star charts showing the locations of hundreds of similar installations throughout the galaxy. Humanity now had a roadmap to technology and resources that could support expansion for thousands of years. Marcus recovered from his wounds and took charge of training the colony's security forces. He established defensive positions throughout the mountain range and developed protocols for dealing with future alien attacks. The Zephyrians would certainly return someday, and he wanted to be ready for them. Katie often walked through the forest where she had first struggled to survive with Danny. The purple trees and strange wildlife that had once seemed so dangerous now felt familiar and welcoming. She had learned to see this alien world as home rather than as a hostile environment. The colony's success attracted visitors from across human space, including government officials and military commanders, who wanted to understand how such a young person had achieved so much. Katie handled these meetings with confidence and grace, but she always made sure that Danny and Marcus received credit for their contributions. Danny grew into his abilities and became humanity's first true alien technology specialist. He could interface with systems that baffled the most brilliant human engineers and often solved problems that had stumped research teams for months. But he never lost his close relationship with Katie or his gratitude to Marcus for saving their lives. 5 years after the battle, Captain Rogers returned to visit the thriving research colony. She found Katie, now 21, leading a team of scientists in exploring new regions of the planet. Marcus served as her trusted advisor and security chief, while Danny had become an essential bridge between human and alien technology. The girl who had once knocked desperately on Marcus's cabin door seeking help for her sick brother had become one of humanity's most important leaders. She had proven that humans could not only survive in the harshest conditions, but could thrive and build something better than what they had lost. Katie Murphy had saved her brother, defended her home, and opened a new chapter in human exploration of the galaxy. She had shown that courage and determination could overcome any obstacle, and that the strength of family bonds could triumph over the greatest challenges. The mountain that had once been their refuge was now the foundation for humanity's expansion into a larger universe filled with infinite possibilities.